Hello, and thank you for joining us for this Visual Voice Residency chat. My name is Bettina. I'm the director of Visual Voice Gallery. Visual Voice presents contemporary art projects that are in dialogue with science. We are an exhibition space as well as a site for research and creation. In response to the current pandemic, for the coming year, Visual Voice will transform into a studio space for artists and residents. I believe that the fields of art and science have much in common, particularly the practice of research. We will foreground research practice and allow audiences to follow our artists on their creative journey. During each residency, artists will talk about their plans, share their artworks in progress, and discuss their thoughts and insights. Our attention will be centered as much on the creative process as on the final outcome of the residency. An integral part of the residencies are chats with the artists at the beginning of their journey, then again about halfway through their stay, and a final chat at the end of their residency. This is our first chat with Montreal-based multimedia artist Swarm, who started her residency on December 1st and will stay with us until February 1st, 2021. Welcome, Swarm. Hi.
Thank you. So it's such an honor to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the kind of art you're making. What's your creative practice look like now?
So overall, my practice is very multidisciplinary. I don't define myself by a medium. I define myself by the concepts that I work with. So my practice revolves around making artistic inquiries into astrophysical concepts, ranging from the very big to the very small. I like to say from micro to macro because it's catchy. And I'm currently completing my undergraduate degree at Concordia in fibers and material practices. And this is where I have began cultivating a research creation practice that I like to call astrofibers, which is an exploration of the structure, nature, and materiality of the universe through textile practices ranging from contemporary to traditional. For example, contemporary would be like working with dust and light, and traditional would be like weaving on the loom or crochet or something else. Yeah, so that can also find itself in performance art, in photography, in pretty much anything. Everything goes.
That sounds really interesting. So you're really not constrained by the medium.
No, I definitely let the concepts like lead me, but also the medium does lead me too. Sometimes I have a desired medium, other times I just have an idea, but they kind of end up becoming one, like, I don't know how to explain it properly, I guess, but there's like research in material creation, like actual creating, and then there's like research in concepts, and then at some point they meet, and they meet successfully.
Mm-hmm. And you are right now at Concordia University. Tell us a bit more about what you're studying there.
So I'm studying fibers and material practices. So it's a focus on textiles, but it's also a very malleable program because there's not that many like required classes. So there's like the traditional like textiles, and then there's like special topics where we do textiles, but really it can be anything, because anything can be textiles if you think about it. So I've taken fibers classes that are very like time-based, where they focus on things like sound, and that's been really eye-opening for me. And then I've taken very technical classes like intermediate weaving classes, printing and dyeing techniques, and then just finding a balance between the two. But right now I'm actually taking a lot of intermediate cyber arts classes as electives. So I just finished a class called Electronics for Artists, and that one is like really like anyone can take it. It's hard to get into because everybody wants to take it, but it's the kind of thing where like they just give you tools and then they let you like apply it to your own practice that you're already working with. And then there's classes like programming for artists, where it's like taking that to the next level, where you like can like hack electronics to your desire, make random mundane objects into instruments with this program called Max. Yeah, so and I also take a lot of sculpture classes as well. And sculpture is obviously very broad, just like fibers. So it's basically just like all about materiality in the end.
Yeah, really interesting, this kind of cross-fertilization that's going on there in your practice, and also all the things that you're interested in, from like real hands-on materiality to the digital realm, and finding sort of connection points there and just letting yourself go. This is the wonderful thing about being a student, that you're really right at the cutting edge and you get to try everything, right? Really experiment.
Yeah, I feel like Concordia is the best place to be for that too, because they have so much resources at our disposal when there's not a pandemic, at least.
So, and talking about like multidisciplinary, it's really also interdisciplinary work that you do, because you are interested in astronomy. So tell us more about what that is about, and how you got inspired in astronomy.
Well, I would like to start sharing my screen now. Actually.
Nice. So what are we looking
Yes.
at?
This is a performative astrophotography piece that I did this summer. I actually got this idea when we were doing the workshop for International Astronomy Day at the planetarium last year, the Galactic Orientation Workshop. And in that workshop, we used augmented reality apps to situate people in outer space from where they were standing. So for example, we were like pointing at things in relation to where we were. So to point at the galactic center, we were pointing at the ground, because at the time the galactic center was below the horizon. And that actually gave me the idea to do a piece where I'm pointing at Sagittarius A star, the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, with a laser. My good friend, Pierre Paquette, friendly neighborhood astronomer, took me to Sutton, where he works at this outdoor planetarium, and helped me get access to an astronomical laser so that I could actually point at Sagittarius A star to the best of my ability, and take a selfie of me doing it. And I call it black hole chaser, because that's kind of this concept I've been running with in my head, where it's like, because I do a lot of art about black holes, and this is actually how I mean, it's not the only way I got an interest in astronomy, but when I was in like grade 3, I found out what black holes were, and I was absolutely fascinated and terrified at the same time, and became kind of obsessed. And then over time, like obviously my life, ebbs and flows and stuff, but yeah, so I find that with these lasers, it's like the closest you can get to touching the sky with your fingertip. And it's a very like immersive experience for me. And I really wanted to just touch, like, what would it be like to touch a black hole if I could? So I did. And by now, those photons have been consumed by the black hole, which is really cool. And it was actually really nice to go to a dark sky site for the first time in years and actually see the Milky Way in all its beauty, because I live in Montreal and light pollution and clouds are quite frequent here. I have a telescope, but I don't get to use it much because Montreal just loves clouds.
Yes, we call it the Montreal Nebula. Whenever there's anything like meteor shower or an eclipse, immediately the cloud's over. So, wow. So who are we looking at now?
Yeah, so you asked me how I became interested in astronomy. And I'm very careful with how I say this, because I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or something, but people always want to credit my interest in astronomy to my father, who is in this photo. He's an amateur astronomer and telescope designer. So astronomy and telescopes were always around me. Like when I see telescopes, I think of like, gives me a very homey feeling. When I see space photos, I get a very homey feeling. It's like part of my background, I guess, and like, I was resistant to incorporate it into my identity as a person for a while, because I was like, I don't care about space, I'm rebelling. And then eventually I did come back to it because when I moved to Montreal, it was a very sudden, but mildly traumatic move. And I was looking for home. And I started with Star Trek. So, and then that led to becoming more and more interested in astrophysics because I always had a very like brief interest in it over time. But everything I found and came across left me wanting more. Like, you know, like the Cosmos series by Neil Tyson, like I like it, but it doesn't really go into it as much as I want. So I started eventually going to Astro McGill lectures in 2016, and I've been going to every one that I can since then. I get that's like where I do a lot of my research for my work. Actually, I take notes and I watch the live streams over and over. I just really love what they're doing. I have the T-shirt, I got the mug. Like, I really do frequent those talks a lot. That's one sad thing about the pandemic is that now they're all online, so I don't actually go to them. But now I'm like, oh, I can just watch the video whenever I want, so it's okay. But it's not the same experience. But yeah, so my dad does this, and I actually this summer I got an opportunity to see a comet for the first time because he created his own film, Comet Odyssey, and which was basically about chasing comets, like the one here. I believe it's Comet High. I don't know how to pronounce it. The Hayakutake. Sorry, I did not look that up before, but anyway. So I got to see Neowise.
Wow.
Thanks to Pierre again, who also helped me get the photo with the laser. So it's nice to have an astronomy friend in Montreal, or in Quebec at least. He doesn't live in Montreal, but yeah. So I wanted to take photos of the comet, but like I said, I'm an artist and like I do performance art, and I really love performative photography. So this was really hard, but I'm really glad that I managed to do it because like I had the camera there, it was dark, and like I was like literally guessing where to stand. So I'm really impressed with how this turned out. I had to get a new camera with a full-size sensor, not a cropped sensor, so that I could have like serious light sensitivity for these projects. This one is my favorite one. I don't know why. I just like it better than this one, but I love them both. But it was cool to like take a selfie with a comet, just like my dad did in the 90s when I was like a kid. You know, it's kind of like that like lineage type thing going on. And yeah, I've been encouraged. I felt encouraged to like embrace that more. But my dad and I are also very different. Like he's an optical astronomer. I'm really into radio astronomy. Like I have an optical telescope, but I also have a mini radio telescope that I'm trying to get working. But right, I'm like really passionate about radio. He's like, what?
Radio is a great idea, especially because you're in an urban environment with lots of light pollution and Montreal nebulous, because you are not dependent on if the night sky is clear.
Exactly.
You can just listen to the sky whenever you feel like it.
Exactly. And that brings me back to this piece that I did last year in my intermediate weaving fibers class. I forget what the prompt was, but I decided I really liked the weaving pattern Serge Undulé, which is a undulating twill. It reminded me of radio waves in the way like it's like really wavy. I don't know if it's best in this photo, but that's how I arranged it. So I wanted to do a piece about different ways of seeing and like using technology to using technology as like another sense. So like with the radio telescope, we can see through the clouds. And I in my first year in sculpture, I created this black, what I now call Milky Way dust. It was supposed to just be like, you know, the empty space between things because I was doing a tactile sky on the floor. It's salts that I dyed with like tons of food coloring colors mixed together. It actually took so long to make it black because you can't get water-based black food coloring. You can only get the sugar-based because for the icing, and that did not work. It made the salt rock hard. So I had to like carefully mix all the primary colors together over and over again to make the salt black. And I've been using it over and over.
That is so fascinating, because that is an exercise that I do with my students in a studio class, and especially for beginners, to mix 2 or 3 colors to mix a black, which seems so impossible when you have these light colors. And it's like, how can I mix an absence of color with pigment? And I know how hard it is. You need to get it just right, otherwise it becomes like a muddy, nasty, like slimy color. And these look gorgeous. The night sky, is that the piece in the middle that you're talking about?
Yes, that is the salt. That's the photo of the salt. It's a black and white photo of the salt. It's kind of more bluey, but it's like bluish black. But sometimes it also looks red. I don't know. It's because it's a mixture, you know. But I actually made like little Fimo clay stars with white clay, and like they actually got left in there and soaked up some of the food coloring and turned really dark blue, which I found really interesting. So that's an ongoing material exploration. And I actually, when I made this piece, because the idea is this was inspired by the Great Rift in the middle of the galaxy, like those black patches in the sky that we see. I learned, again, through the Galactic Orientation Workshop at the planetarium, that is dust, not empty space, like most people would believe. And I was like, oh my God. And I totally saw this salt that I made in a new way. So I actually have a little test tube with it in it called a Milky Way Dust sample. And that is inspiration for a next Milky Way Dust sample that I want to do to the best of my ability, where I actually take like iron and like metal shards, and I want to see actually what it would look like obviously to the limitations on Earth, because like cosmic dust exists in space and it exists in a certain way because there's no oxygen and et cetera, but this inspired me to eventually make a real Milky Way dust sample to the best of my ability. So like I want to study the composition, there's the word, the composition of the dust in the Great Rift, and try and like source those materials and eventually make another sample and then put them together, you know, see like the artistic representation and then like the material astrofibers representation. I think that would be really fun. And of course I put antennas in there to reference radio. And yeah, so, and then like the radio wave weaving goes in between the clouds of dust, and it's very literal but it also kind of looks like an organic animal in a way, which I really like at the same time, like a snail.
There's lots of ways of reading this piece, and I think most interesting art pieces are have like elegant, simple research questions, but the outcome can be read many different ways. So it's kind of multi-layered, and it has complexity that is really compelling.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like this piece. I would like to show it again someday. And then more astrofibers. Last year I did a multiverse waffle weave. The waffle weave is a dishcloth weaving structure, because it's very absorbent because of the little squares. But when I see the waffle weave, I'm like, oh my God, each square is a universe. And I get like, I want to poke them all. And I'm like interdimensional poking, like, you know, I get really excited. So I tried in first year to make one. And then there's this technique called ICAT weaving that I kind of took inspiration from, where you kind of like control dye the strings, and then like they make an image. Obviously what I'm doing is not traditional because but it's like kind of inspired by that, but it's also inspired by shibori, which is tie-dye, like the fancy actual, not like there's tie-dye and then there's shibori, and tie-dye is like the watered down version of shibori. So I took inspiration from those techniques because I wanted star string. So, you know, I take what are they called? Skeins of mercerized cotton thread. Mercerized cotton absorbs dye the most. So, and then I put elastics on them. And they didn't come out very starry in all places, but I kind of like how it turned out because each of them is kind of different, which is the goal, but also kind of the same and also connected but separate. And it's actually very long. So it's very small though too at the same time. Like it's hard to get mercerized cotton threads in a thicker gauge. I don't know why, but I'm going to keep looking and try again, because I think the bigger the squares can be, the more the point gets across. Because sadly, whenever I show this piece, I had to figure out how to actually like show it. I didn't get a chance to finish it in time to actually show it properly for my critique. I showed it on the loom during my critique because I had so many obstacles. Like, you know, when you're cutting the elastics off after the dye bath, you have to be really careful. I cut a couple strings. It was a whole thing. So I haven't actually figured out how to show it yet, but right now when people look at it, they think, oh, it's a scarf, you know?
Right. Yeah, and then that is, I think, one of the challenges with fiber arts. It's because we are so used to a more mundane interaction with fibers because we wear them and we have scarves. And you're doing something very special with them, with the fibers. And maybe even having these photographs actually helps you because it forces us into a really close-up perspective that normally maybe we wouldn't take. So
Yeah.
I really love this photo because it looks both organic and geometric at the same time.
Thank you.
Get a good sense of the piece.
Yeah, and this also started a narrative in my head. Like in the one where I have the sewing pin in one of the squares, you know, when I'm working, I get very cerebral and I get very like immersed in the narrative that I've created behind my work. So from this piece, I created a character called the Multiverse Traverser, who's like an omnipotent astronaut who can like zoom out and zoom in and like traverse the multiverse. And that's also like a Franglish thing. So you can see that living in Montreal is having an influence on me. I'm really happy about that. I think mixing languages is beautiful. So yeah, my whole narrative behind that photo was I had to pin the universe that I originated from so that I wouldn't get lost on my way home. You know, and I just found that, like, I don't know, philosophical in a way.
Yeah, yes. And cosmology and philosophy have lots of overlap.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely, which is something that I love. Like, I love the big questions that come with cosmology, and which is why I'm so excited for this residency. And I also do exploration into black holes because black holes, I will never not love black holes. If I could have a pet black hole, I would.
It looks like you do have a pet black hole right there.
Yes. So I like to play around with beadwork as well. And I bought these cheap beads. They were black beads because I just wanted to like learn. And, you know, sometimes uniform beads are not the look you're going for. Sometimes they are. But with this one, I found a lot of non-beads. And some of them ended up being just spherical black pieces. And I was like, oh, it's a primordial black hole because primordial black holes are microscopic and apparently existed in the early universe. So I'm going to be looking more into that. I actually have a whole little vial of them that I've collected that I brought to the gallery. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet, but I'm really excited. And then I've done more like traditionally fibrous black hole explorations where I investigated doilies as accretion disks. And eventually I want to elaborate on that with an embroidery machine and make a more chaotic textile accretion disc than a orderly doily. But I think it looks really cool. And then I also have a needle felting work that I'm working on called a black hole network. I believe I actually accidentally destroyed it a little, but that's okay because it's very delicate. I was doing a photo shoot and I was like pulling it out of my purse for the photo because I thought it would be really cool. And then the more times we did the photo, it started coming apart. So that was fun. It won't be hard to put back together, but I'm excited. I actually planned to show these with the waffle weave because this is all explorations I started in my intermediate textiles class last year. So those are works in progress. And then I just want to elaborate on this is also related to cosmology, but I don't know if this is the approach I will take during the residency, but who knows? Because you never know where research will take you. But during lockdown, I was like really in my head and like also responding to the prompts in the Art Imaginarium Study Institute Facebook group, which got me thinking and like exploring and like challenging myself. And this, I don't believe this wasn't a response to a prompt, but it was inspired by one of my responses to prompt. I took a piece of like, I was doing a sewing project and I took some thread out of something and it kind of just like was all folded and stuff and it looked really cool. So I put on a piece of paper and I put like salt and like iridescent dust and glitter and stuff on it. And then I have this little macro lens that I can like attach to my phone, which I also got in that textiles class. We did research prompts every week. And I took a photo of it up close and it looks really cosmic. So it's like the universe from the outside and then slowly more zoomed in. And that's an approach that I'm looking more into as well, artistically. And I was able to further elaborate on the Multiverse Traverser concept this year for a conference called the Immersivity and Technological Innovations Conference out of the University of Montreal. I was commissioned to do a piece in Second Life and I was like, okay, this is the perfect place to traverse the multiverse. I bought a skybox sphere in the marketplace and I altered it and I made a whole bunch of different universes that you can.
Wait, skybox. What does that mean?
A skybox is like, it's a box, but once you're inside it, it gives the illusion that it's the only place you're in. So it's like an immersive box, kind of like the black box at Concordia, but like digital.
Okay.
Yeah. So I took a skybox sphere and changed the textures on a bunch of them and put a bunch of things in them. But I was just like, one of the main criticisms I've gotten in my multiverse explorations so far is that all my universes look kind of the same. So I really took that as inspiration to like push myself a little further in this project. And basically you can traverse the multiverse as an avatar in this environment, which is really fun. And in Second Life, you can fly. So when everyone came and flew through the multiverse, and I tried to do it as a controlled performance, but you know, I'm still learning as I go. Everybody just kind of wandered off and got really excited and I couldn't control anyone. So I was like, okay, go ham, like, you know, like have fun. And everybody like had their own like performative, immersive experience of being a multiverse traverser, which was really fun for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a fun idea to go into Second Life for that kind of thing. And I like how, you know, on one hand you're doing fiber arts and you're really working with material, and then the next moment you're in the digital realm doing virtual reality, but the common thread, so to speak, kind of punish, is your research question about the beginning of time and what a universe means, you know, both as a mathematical construct, but also what it means to us and to exist in it.
Yes, exactly. And whether or not more than one universe occurred after the Big Bang, which is like a big question.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more of what you've got planned for your residency.
Yes. So I plan to specifically zero in on cosmology and the early universe because I've been very interested in the early universe for quite some time. I've gone to a few talks about it. I went to an Astro McGill talk about black holes at cosmic dawn. And I'm really in, and also another Astro McGill talk called, what was it called? Searching for Cosmic Dawn. And it was about radio astronomers and their like extraneous efforts to observe the early universe, because the early universe radio frequency is the same as FM radio. So all of our FM radio signals are bombarding the planet. So they have to go way out where there's hardly any signals, completely isolated. And I don't know how they don't go crazy down there. I mean, I really admire scientists and their field work. Like it must take an emotional toll, but it was the prof giving the talk was Cynthia Chiang from McGill. I really loved her talk. Like that talk blew my mind. Like I plan to explore that concept. I've already have been slowly, because you can observe the early universe with just a radio receiver. All that static, in that static, there's latent radiation from the Big Bang, and like latent signals from the universe's first stars. Obviously, you can't isolate it, but I plan to actually do a listening exercise each day, whether with my headphone radio receivers or with the small radio receiver I'll be bringing to the gallery, where I just listen to the static and see where that takes me. I want to do sonic explorations of cosmic dawn, and like when the lights turned on, I plan to do an immersive sound art piece about that. And I also plan to take inspiration from research about the Big Bang from various cosmologists and electroacoustics authors. There's a book called Discord by Mike Goldsmith, who is an astrophysicist and I want to say electroacoustics or something along those lines. But he works out of Oxford, I believe. And he wrote a book called Discord. And in that book, he talks about how the Big Bang was silent, which is not something that we tend to assume because we call it the Big Bang and it's often represented as an explosion. So we think that the universe just like, pow, here we are. But it was actually like really quiet and long drawn out. And his book, Discord, is about the evolution of noise in the universe. So I plan to take creative inspiration from his book to create a sound art piece. And I plan to do field recording of things like traffic, because in his book, he mentions that the baby universe sounds a lot like distant wailing or distant muffled traffic. So it's a very literal exploration, but I plan to let it go places and add my own finesse, as I always do. So yeah, I'll be doing field recording, listening, and sonic explorations, as well as visual explorations. I have done some already, very small explorations into this idea. I did this painting after I finished A Brief History of Time, finally. Wow, what a book. I can see why a lot of people have it but haven't read it, because it is dense for a pop science book. My breath was just taken away when I finally finished it though, and I can't wait to like go through it again, having already read it, and take inspiration from it. But this is basically what I call a macroscopic view of the universe from the Big Bang to the Big Chill. So the Big Bang is like the beginning, and the Big Chill is the theoretical end of the universe, where everything expands out so much that the universe just goes cold and dark, which is really kind of depressing. In some lectures, I've also seen it referred to as the heat death of the universe, which sounds really metal, which is pretty badass. I think that's a really, I love the names that astrophysicists come up with for all their stuff. There's just so much inspiration that I take from that. They also have this other one called I think after the Big Chill, it's kind of like the Big Bounce theory, where the universe expands and contracts and then expands again. It's like, okay, there's the Big Chill, and then I don't remember. Well, anyway, at some point there's a big rip, and I just think it's funny that they called it the Big Rip, because how do they expect people to interpret that? I just think that's hilarious.
Creatively. And I think this is why people talk about these concepts so much, because they are fun, right? They are very pictorial, and you make an association with these immediately. And I think that is why it sort of enters pop culture as well. But as you said, not always in the correct way. I mean, the Big Bang, it makes total sense that, there was no sound at the time. What was the time before the Big Bang? Well, there was no time, because time and space were born at the same time. So
exactly,
a lot of these really profound fundamental concepts that you are challenging through this work and that you are poking at, right?
Yes, and I learn as I create too, and I find it really it's hard for me to learn these concepts just by reading and listening. I have to do something tangible to really understand it. So this is a learning process for me too, as someone who's interested in astrophysics. And I actually did a performance piece. I don't consider it to be totally successful. I want to try it again at some point, but I made these like reflective painted beads and I put them on stretchy fabric. So like I kind of like beaded them into a circle. And the idea was like I would stretch them out and they would contract and expand. And I was like the unseen force behind it all. And I called it the Big Stretch in reference to funny names like the Big Rip, because it also in the performance I was stretching with the piece. And also, since we learn about and explore the universe through photography, and I was using reflective paint, I told everybody in the audience to take photos of me with their flash while I was performing, so that it was their chance to like take a photo of the beginning of time, kind of. And like the concept, I really loved the way it was executed. I would have to try it again, but I thought I would include it anyway because it's relevant. It was probably one of the weirdest pieces I've done. Definitely an experiment that there's a lot to take from.
It's I think every piece is an experiment, and even those that you think that are successful are always experiments. They have sometimes unintended consequences, and that is why it's so important also to show your work to a larger audience, because the feedback that you get from people interacting and seeing your work, those comments can be really enriching and spark another creative cycle.
Exactly. Yes, I plan to explore this a bit more and maybe do the Big Stretch again. I also think that's just such a funny name. Like I love to bring humor into my work here and there. I think it's important. And again, I really like reflective material because I feel like it's perfect. It's a perfect way to represent the like hot, dense plasma at the beginning of the universe. Like this is like it's just a flat piece of reflective fabric that I found from someone's like construction worker vest or something. I just like cut a little hole and I took a photo like this. And I actually have a spool of reflective thread at the gallery right now that I plan to do explorations with and see where that goes, because yeah, it's just glowing and it looks hot, but it also looks kind of cold depending on how you photograph it, what white balance you use. So that's really something I'm going to explore probably through video. Yeah. So
nice, because at the gallery, that's a really great spot because you can totally lock it down and it'll be a lightless box, right? You can really like make it very dark, and you're in the middle of traffic for your sound recordings. We're in downtown Montreal, so you'll have plenty of traffic. So
exactly, yeah. And I plan to tug at some existential threads somehow too, right? Because obviously I can only create these pieces with like, well, some would say mundane earthly objects to convey these like really phenomenal, ethereal, astrophysical concepts. So there's kind of like an existential element in it in that way too.
That's right. Brilliant. So you've got a really fantastic research question, and
yes,
lots of great avenues and already materials that you brought into the gallery space to start your exploration. How can people visit you? Is it by appointment?
Yes, I would say by appointment is best. That way I know when you're coming. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And also during the pandemic, you know, that's probably the best way to keep everybody safe.
Exactly.
And we will regularly check in with you. All right, I think it's time to thank Swarm and say goodbye for now.
Thank you.
And we will catch up again really soon for our next sort of halfway intermediate residency check-in. And then we have a big finissage at the end. So this residency is as much about the creative process as it is the outcome. So I'm really looking forward to seeing all your ideas and materials and projects develop.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this golden opportunity. I'm so excited.
So am I.